viewers, welcome to Asianet Newsable's book discussion section. In recent years, we have seen a notable enhancement of India's image on the global stage, which gives us an opportunity to revisit the historical accounts which talks about the country's past. Now, some of the texts have their own narratives shaped by colonial perspectives and biases, and it continues to influence contemporary perceptions of India. The book that we'll be discussing today is called Crossing Continents, which is a critical examination of historical accounts, particularly penned by European travelers. So I welcome the author of the book, Amit Agarwal. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, I want to begin this discussion by asking you what motivated you to focus on this book and talk about the historical narratives from European travelers' perspective who came to India from the 13th century onwards.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. So the prime motive to write about the European travelers was that they have written an entirely different history, our Indian history. Basically, what happened in the medieval era and in the later years, the history was written by either by the Islamic historians or then by after independence by the Indian leftist historians. So they have written the history from their perspective. So our perspective was nowhere. So for any history, there will be certain bias somewhere. If Muslim historians are writing, then they will write from their perspective. If the leftist writers are writing, they will write from their own perspective. But where are our perspectives? There must be some different perspectives also. So here the European travelers come in handy. So when they wrote about our history, then they were slightly unbiased, in the sense that they were just travelers. They were not sent by any king or by their regime or by kingdoms. So they came because they loved India or they wanted to see India. So that's why their history is unbiased, sort of unbiased, not entirely unbiased, but it gives you a different perspective. And they wrote about the daily life in India. What is happening in India, not about the kings and the battles and this and that. So from the common man perspective, they wrote what is happening in India right now. So to know about the integrative history, we have to read about these European travelers also. So the holistic view will be of the history will be when we read about the European travelers, when we read up the history by our historians and then by Islamic historians, and when we read about the inscriptions, when we came to know about the archaeological evidence, then it gives a holistic view.
So, sir, in your book also you write that the European travelers were not bound by the rulers, and so the history that they have written, the travelogues that they have written, they are largely unfiltered and unbiased. Rightly so, but sir, in your research, you must have also encountered many sorts of biases in the accounts of other people who have written India's narratives that distort the historical understanding of India. If you can just elaborate on it with some examples to address what these biases look like.
Actually, these European travelers, they were invariably Christians. So they came from the entirely different civilization, from the different culture. So when they came to India, it came as a shock to them, even though they knew what was waiting for them. So in that, after the 15th century, industrial revolution was coming up, Renaissance was going on. So they were slightly with open mind, right? So they were the discoverers. They want to explore the whole world. They wanted to explore the space. They wanted to explore the seas, and they were all going around the world. They were going to search America. They were going to search for the new path of India, because that path from Europe to India, the land route, was blocked by the Arabs after the Islamic Golden Age. So they needed the new path, new route. So when these travelers came, so they were, they were getting richer by the day. When in 1600, when East India Company was formed, or I think 1598, so India's GDP was 4 times of that of England. By the time 1947 they went back, their GDP was 4 times than us. So that means in the 300 years, around 16 times GDP has changed. So we became very poor at that time. So India was very rich at that time, even though we were under the Mughals. So we were even then economic powerhouse. Though we may not be socially or culturally powerhouse, we were subjugated at that time. So those travelers, when they came, so they view India as a from the Christian perspective. So they were shocked to see the idols, our deities with 10 heads and four arms. So they said कि ये सब क्या है ये? They haven't seen all those things. And then when they came here, they came to know about the caste system. So they were totally ignorant about the caste system. And then there was Sati, their favorite bugbear, और जो जिससे हमें जो है हमेशा ट्रोल किया जाता रहा फ्रॉम द एंशियंट टाइम्स. सो ये सब बाइसेस उनके पास थे उनके मन में, बट इट वाज नॉट रिटन इन दैट पर्सपेक्टिव एक्चुअली. When they wrote about the Sati, they forgot about the witch hunting back home in Europe in I think 17th century. 50,000 or 16,000 witches. Witches means they're women who became widow for their property. They were branded as witches, and then they were burned. So exactly like Sati, they have burned the witches, which was the term given was the witch hunting. So in 1 year in Europe, in England, 50,000 women were burned. So they forgot about their witch hunting and they castigated the Sati. Similarly, they wrote very badly about the Thagi system. You know Thagi in the highways in the India in the ancient times in the 17th or 16th century. When the travelers go or traders went from one place to another place, then thugs used to accompany them, befriend them, and then they used to kill them for the money. So exactly the same phenomena was going in the England and the Europe also. So that was called highwaymen. So in the highway, those bandits and those robbers, they used to rob the traders and the travelers and kill them. So that way, the whatever they castigated us, it also happened back home. But while writing, they wrote about only these things and they forgot that the same thing was happening. Similarly about the caste also. You know, in the 15th and 16th century, there was a fierce war between the Protestants and Catholics, wherein lakhs of people were killed. You know, Galileo was also killed because of that, because he said that Earth is moving around the sun. And the church did not pay heed to it, and they said this is blasphemy, and he was basically jailed and then he died there. So they had certain biases, but some of the travelers, they loved India, they loved our culture, they loved the color, they loved the spirituality around here. Even though they were poor, they said Indians are so happy. So inherently there are biases. And then in 19th century also, there were many female travelers also came when British Raj was there. So the two prominent female travelers were there, Fanny Parks and Maud Diver. So they said basically British were sacrificing a lot while ruling India. They are civilizing India because basically that's a white man's burden. So they are here to civilize Indians. So they are giving us telegraph, they are giving us railways, they are giving us telephone, roads, etc., hospitals, etc., modern day hospitals, etc. They are protecting us from cholera. And while writing this, while saying this, they forgot that they ensured that 38 famines occurred in the 200 years from 1757 to 1947. In 200 years, 38 major famines were there in India. And in each famine, and it was man-made famine, it was not that there was no rains or something drastic happened. It was man-made rain. Churchill, I think in 1920, 1930, he blocked the movement of the food from one place to Bengal. And around 10 lakh people were killed in Bengal alone, just 100 years back. So when we read about all these, if we remove those biases, then we get the actual history. They wrote about very interesting histories, like there was one Italian traveler, Nicolai Manucci, and I have given him the maximum space in my book. So he was a 17-year-old boy. He just left his country, Venice, at that time, when one ship was going, and then he entered the ship, boarded the ship, and then he came to India. And he befriended Dara Shikoh, who was the prince, and according to his father Shah Jahan, he was going to be the next Mughal Badshah of India. But Aurangzeb did not listen to him, and then he killed the Dara Shikoh in a fierce battle, and arrested his father Shah Jahan. So Manuchi wrote about the harems of Mughal, what depravity is going on there, and what was the medical conditions in India at that time. Later, he studied 2 or 3 medical books, and then he became the doctor also. So that's why he was called a Hakim Manuchi. So he wrote a story of the Mughal. He wrote extensively about the Indian life, what was happening at that time, and he was the first fellow, first Christian who wrote about the Goa Inquisition also. In the Goa at that time, in the region of Goa, from I think 15th century till 18th century, 1830, Portuguese Christians killed around 10 lakh Hindus, and not even Hindus. They killed the Muslims or Christians also, those who were not Catholics. Rest were all heathens and pagans. So he wrote about the Goa Inquisition also. He wrote about the many different things. So he gave the actual picture of India at that time. And because of being a doctor, he was also privy to the Mughal harem. He went to the harem also, where no male was allowed. So because those Mughals thought these Christians are very morally superior, so the white guy are very morally superior, so they shall be given access to the harem whenever any woman was sick. So he used to go there. So he told about what was happening at that time. So a Mughal, he wrote around 200 slaves were there in the harem at one time. So likewise, Tavernier, there was another French traveler and trader, Tavernier. He used to trade in the gems, diamonds, basically diamonds and other gems. So he took tons of the diamonds from India to the France, and one diamond was around 500 carat at that time. That was called a Hope diamond. So he bought Hope in very मतलब बहुत ही कम पैसों में उसने हमसे खरीदा, and then he took to France, and then they polished it, they cut it into multiple pieces, and like that. So all those travelers wrote about the Indian history, what was happening at that time, and we must read those accounts also.
So, because you give so many examples of how the biases persisted, white people who came to India wrote about India. But when you talk about contemporary India, do you still feel that there is some lingering effect of all that happened because of the documentation done by these people?
Yeah, so those images still linger on in the minds of the Europeans and the Americans, and they still treat India as a land of spirituality, and they are practicing yoga. I think in every European and American city, yoga is practiced and is very popular there. So India is called a land of yoga and spirituality. So they come here and learn yoga and go back there. And India used to be center of the learning also in the ancient times. In 2000 years back, lot many Southeast Asians and Chinese and Japanese used to come to India and learn Sanskrit and other texts, and they used to translate while living in India, and then they used to take it back to propagate Buddhism and Hinduism back in their countries. So that image is also there. India was sometimes was a knowledge powerhouse, and it was like Harvard of today, Nalanda, Takshila, Sharda, Vikramshila. There were not many universities. And in one recent Chinese film, is a story about the Huensang, I think, Huensang or Fayan, one of the two. And he used to learn Sanskrit for 2 years, and then he came back. He came to Nalanda. He gave that interview in Sanskrit. When the Acharya was sufficiently convinced that he knew Sanskrit very well, then only he was given the admission. It's same like giving the exam of TOEFL. So in the way, America is ancient India, and nowadays Europe was also recognizing that India is progressing very fast. We have already become fifth largest economy, and they recognize that in next 10 years we will become third largest economy. So we are technologically also progressing very fast. Our all the major companies, Fortune 100 companies, the CEOs are our fellows Indians are there, and even the medical facility is very good. You know, Prince Charles, the king of England, on the yearly basis he comes to India and takes the treatment of Vipassana and other Ayurveda in Bangalore. Recently, last month he was also there. So that way, India is still considered very spiritual, very advanced, becoming very advanced nowadays, economically also. So I think in the next 10 years, I think we will one of the three powerful countries with China and America.
So, because you studied from IIT Roorkee, if I'm not wrong, you are on a sabbatical and taking out time to write on subject which is very passionate to you, that is history. So, are you planning to write another book which talks about narratives beyond European travelers? Maybe the narratives which were built by Islamic invaders or any other sort of history that we can expect from your next work?
Yes, yes, yes. Actually, I have written only about five, six travelers in my book, and it is a very short volume, because if I start writing about European travelers itself after 12th century, there must be around 100 who wrote about India. So there was a Marco Polo, there was Nicolai de Conti, there were not many fellows, many travelers who came to India. So even after 12th century, if I write, I can fill 2 or 3 volumes also about European travelers only. And then if I want to write about the Islamic travelers also, and I write a little bit in my first book, Swift Horses, Sharp Swords. That was my first book. I wrote about the Al-Baruni, Ibn Battuta. They came to India, and Al-Baruni wrote the best about India. He was very conversant with Sanskrit also. He knew that India gave the base foundation of science and maths. Zero was invented. All the numerals from 0 to 9 were our numerals, which was imported by the Arabs, and then they exported it to the Europe. But in Europe, even now, they know that only 0 is invented by us, while 1 to 9 was invented by Arabs. So I want to write about that thing also, which Al-Baruni wrote, that yes, these inventions were carried out by the Indians. Ibn Battuta came in the later, I think, 12th or 13th century, but he saw the India from the Islamic prism only. That there's no impact of Sharia here. No woman is roaming in burqa, and Indian culture is amalgamation of Hinduism and Islam. So he was very peeved actually at that time. So, but it's an interesting observation. I will whenever I choose to write about the Islamic travelers, I will write about these two also, the Al-Baruni and the Ibn Battuta. There were many others also, like Utbi, Farishta. So they were the basically court historians. They came with the invaders and they wrote from their perspective. So I think their history is not worth spending time.
It was such an interesting conversation, and I hope, sir, that you in your research continue to encounter all these biases and continue to shatter them in your books.